So I'm at the hour. What am I doing here? Hey, Wild. Hey, congratulations on the 45 stream streak. That's very impressive. Thank you. How did I miss that? Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Hope you're doing well. Why am I here? Shouldn't be here. Weird. Huh. And that shouldn't be up. God. Behind everything today. Huh. But yeah, congratulations on first, Wild. And thank you for... Yeah, again, thank you for the streak. I do genuinely appreciate it. Well... Sorry, normally I try and answer in chat and that, but I just, zoned out there for a moment. Don't know what's going on. Oh. Yeah, I hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, so. Oh, sorry, my head's all over the place today. What are we doing? Right, well, first things first, we've got to head over to a lamp screen. Oh, thanks for you. Yeah. Congratulations there. That is your 9th first, which I do genuinely appreciate. Also, Eagle-eyed viewers might know, NASCAR has gained an additional mark. I brought up his contributions during the discussion yesterday, and Lamp agreed that apparently that's worth a bonus mark, apparently. I don't know how these work yet. I thought they were just for getting first, but apparently there's something else that you can do to get them, so... I don't know if that's like a firm thing or if it's a one-off, but you know, that's something to know. But yeah, what we do? So yeah, we're about 9. we're going to avoid today. Doesn't look like. But yeah. Again, thank you for claiming first, and again for the 45 stream streak. Crazy. Really appreciate it. I hope you're doing really well today, Wild. Ooh. Yeah. What are we doing? What are we doing? So, anything else on the checklist? No, nothing on the checklist. No new books, Jay. No new followers, and no badges. So, just the 1st of March, and yeah. Again, thank you for the first. I do so appreciate it. That being the case, though, without any further ado, I suppose let's get into today's poetry reading. So, let me change up the mic, I guess. There we are. Now, we will once again be continuing on with our reading of Worn Much Missed by Thomas Hardy. And what I said yesterday, I thought we might finish it. Today I'm almost certain of the fact. So, without any further ado, let us begin with Where the Picnic Was. Where we made the fire in the summertime, of branch and briar on the hill to the sea, I slowly climb through the winter mire, and scan and trace the forsaken place quite readily. Now a cold wind blows, and the grass is grey, but the spot still shows a burnt circle, aye, and stick ends charred still strew and sward, whereon I stand, last relic of the band who came that day. Yes, I am here, just as last year, and the sea breathes brine from its strange straight line, up hither the same as when we four came, but two have wandered far from this grassy rise, into urban roar where no picnics are, and one has shut her eyes for evermore. Thank you, Wild, I do appreciate it, and again congratulations on the 45 stream streak. It is truly remarkable to me. Now then, where were we? Ah, yes. We sat at the window, Bournemouth, 1875. We sat at the window looking out, and the rain came down like silken strings. That Swithin's day, each gutter and spout, babbled unchecked in the busy way of witless things. Nothing to read, nothing to see, seemed in that room for her and me on Swithin's day. We were irked by the scene, by our own selves, yes, for I did not know, nor did she infer, how much there was to read and guess by her in me, and to see and crown by me in her. Wasted were two souls in their prime, and great was the waste that July time, when the rain came down. And I must say, I have never heard of Swithin's Day. That's me saying that to myself, that's not part of the poem. It occurs to me afterwards that it was a rhyming couplet, so there might be some confusion, so. Anyhow, the next we have is At the Word Farewell. She looked like a bird from a cloud on the clammy lawn, moving alone, bare-browed in the dim of dawn. The candles alight in the room for my parting meal made all things without doors loom strange, ghostly, unreal. The air itself was a ghost, and it seemed to me then, as if chances the chance furthermost I should see her again. I beheld not where all was so fleet, that a plan of the past, which had ruled us from birth time to meet, was in working at last. No prelude did I there perceive to a drama at all, or foreshadow what fortune might weave from beginning so small. But I rose as if quickened by a spur, I was bound to obey, and steeped through the casement to her, still alone in the grey. I am leaving you, farewell, I said, as I followed her on, by an alley of bare boughs overspread. I soon must be gone. Even then the scale might have been turned against love by a feather, but a crimson one cheek of hers burned when we came together. Our next poem, once at Swanage. The spray sprang up across the cusp of the moon, and all its light loomed green, and a witch's flame widened some sheen, and the minute of an incantation seen, and it greened our gaze, the night of demi-lune. Roaring high and roaring low was the sea, behind the headland shores. It symboled the slamming of doors, or a regiment hurrying over hollow floors, and there we two stood, hands clasped, I and she. Next we have the musical box. Life longed to be seemed the fair colour of the time, but there was standing shadowed near a spirit who sang to the gentle chime, with the self-struck notes I did not hear, I did not see. Thus did it sing to the mindless lyre that played indoors as she came to listen for me without. Oh, value what the nonce pours, the best of life that shines about your welcoming. I had slowed along, after the torrid hours were done, though still the posts and walls and road flung back their sense of the hot-faced sun, and had walked by Swordside Mill where broad stream lilies throng. And I descried the dusky house that stood apart, and her white muslin waiting there in the porch with high expectant heart, while still the thin mechanic air went on inside. At whiles would flit swart bats whose wings bewebbed and tanned whirled like the wheel of ancient clocks. She laughed, a hailing as she scanned me in the gloom, the tuneful box intoning it. Life longed to be, I thought it, but there watched hard by a spirit who sang to the indoor tune, oh, make the most of what is nigh. I did not hear in my dull soul swoon, I did not see. And next we have a second attempt. 30 years after I began again an old-time passion, and it seemed as fresh as when the first day ventured on, when mutely I would waft her in love's past fashion, dreams much dwelt upon, dreams I wished she knew. I went the course through, from love's fresh found sensation, remembered still so well to worn words charged anew, that left no more to tell, thence to hot hopes and fears, and thence to consummation, and thence to sober years, markless and mellow-hued. From the whole fabric stood, or seemed to stand and sound, as it had stood before, but nothing backwards climbs. And when I looked around, as the former times, there was life, pale and hoar, and slow it said to me, twice over cannot be. Next we have, he prefers her earthly. This after sunset is a sight for seeing, cliff heads of craggy clouds surrounding it, and dwell you in that glory show, you may, for there are strange, strange things in being, stranger than I know. Yet if that chasm of splendor claim your presence, which glows beneath the ash cloud and the dun, how changed must be your mortal mould, changed to a firmament riding earthless essence, from which you were of old. All torn like the fond and fragile creature then known to me, or shall I say it plain? I would not have you thus and there, but still would grieve on, missing you, still feature you as the one you were. The shadow on the stone. I went by the druid stone that broods in the garden white and lone, and I stopped and looked at the shifting shadow that at some moments falls thereon, from the tree hard by with a rhythmic swing, and the shaped in my imagining, to the shade that well-known head and shoulders threw there when she was gardening. I thought her behind my back, yea, her I long had learned to lack, and I said, I am sure you are standing behind me, though how do you get into this old track? And there was no sound but the fall of a leaf, as a sad response, and to keep down grief, I would not turn my head to discover that there was nothing in my belief. Yet I wanted to look and see that nobody stood at the back of me. But I thought once more, nay, I'll not unvision a shape which somehow there may be. So I went on softly from the glade, and left it behind me throwing her shade, as she were indeed an apparition, my head unturned lest my dream should fade. And next we have, she did not turn. She did not turn, but passed foot faint with averted head, in her gown of green by the bobbing fern, while I leaned over the gate that led from where we waited with table spread. But she did not turn. Why was she near there if love had fled? She did not turn, though the gate was whence I had often sped, in the midst of morning to meet her and learn her heart, when its moving moods I read as a book, she mine as she sometimes said. But she did not turn, and passed foot faint with averted head. A 2 years idle. Yes, such it was. Just those 2 seasons unsought, sweeping like summertide wind on our ways, moving as straws, hearts quick as ours in those days, going like wind too and rated as naught, save the prelude to plays soon to come, larger life fraught. Yes, such it was. Naught it was called, even by ourselves, that which springs out of the years for all flesh, first or last, commonplace scrawled, dully on days that go past, yet all the while it uppours like wings. Even in hours overcast, aye, though this best thing of things, naught it was called. What seems it now? Lost, such beginning was all. Nothing came after, romance straight forsook, quickly somehow. Life when we sped from our nook, primed with new scenes, with a design smart and tall, a preface without any book, a trumpet uplipped but no call. That seems it now. If you had known when listening with her to this far down moan of the white selvaged and unpurpled sea, and rain came on that did not hinder talk, or dampen your flashing facile gaiety, in turning home despite the slow wet walk, by crooked ways and over stiles of stone, if you had known. You would lay roses, 50 years thence, on her monument that discloses its greying shape upon the luxuriant green, 50 years thence to an hour by chance led there. What might have moved you, yea, had you foreseen that on the tomb of the self-same one gone where the dawn of every day is as the closes, you would lay roses? The marble tablet. There it stands, though alas, what a little of her shows in its cold white look. Will a glance glide or smile, not a tittle of her, voice like the pearl of a brook, not her thoughts that you read like a book. It may stand for her once in November, when first she breathed witless of all, or in heavy years she would remember when circumstances held her in thrall, or at last when she answered her call. Nothing more. The still marble date graven, given all that it can tersely line, that one has at length found the haven which every one other will find, with silence on what's shown behind. And our last. Day is to recollect. Do you recall that day in fall, when we walked towards St. Alban's Head, over thistle down that summer had shed? Or must I remind you? Winged thistle seeds with hitherto had lain, as none were there or few, but rose at the brush of your petticoat seam, as ghosts might rise of the recently dead, and sailed on the breeze in a nebulous stream, like a comet's tail behind you. You don't recall that day in fall? And do you remember that sad November, when you left me never to see me more, and looked quite other than therefore, as if it could not be you, and lay by the window whence you had gazed so many times when blamed or praised, morning or noon through the years and years, accepting the gifts that fortune bore, sharing enduring joys, hopes, fears. Well, I never more did see you. Say you remember that sad November. And not a problem, Wild. That's the last of our poetry, so I hope you've enjoyed it. As by all appearances, you're the only one here to enjoy it, so I hope you are. But we've run rather over normal time for poetry. I've rather got caught up, so I hope you enjoy your dinner, and I will move back over to a more normal reading pace, and we'll begin our stories for the evening. And there we are. Whoa. Getting caught up today, yeah. First I'm half asleep when we get here, and then the poetry really overtakes me, Lord. Alright then, well, let's head over to our reading screen, and have a quick swallow of water, and we'll do our normal little patter. Cheers. Now then, plan today is to do The Leaves of Happiness, which is about 20 pages, and then, depending on how time is going and how we're enjoying ourselves, we'll maybe do an alcoholic case, which is only about 8. But, as always, if at any point you if at any point you should miss anything that is read today, either because of poor diction on my part, some technical fault, or just a distraction on your own end, no worries at all, just let me know and I'm happy to go back over things. If you have thoughts, comments or questions, do let me know. I don't believe either of these is broken into chapters, given that they're reasonably short, but if, they're both, I'm looking through them now, they're both broken into chapters. So, at the end of chapters, we'll pause to do a little bit of thinking and have a drink. So if you have longer questions, you can ask them then. And if you just have a quick question to make during the text or a comment that is relevant, just do it then, and I'm happy to respond. Always love to hear back from you. If you have a redeem that you want to do, that you think is going to be an interruption, that's also a good time to do them. Or you could do one now, which, if that is the case, do feel free to do it. And of course, if you want to do them during the text, that's fine as well, just up to personal preference is what I mean. That being said, I'll take another drink now to give anyone who does want to do an interruptive or disruptive redeem ahead of time. So, another drink to your health. And then a sort of awkward moment where I'm like, well, how long do I give them to answer it or do one of these things if they want to do it? I never really know, but that is the death. I'll assume that no one does, so that being the case, without any further ado, if you are sitting comfortably, I shall begin. The Leaves of Happiness, Chapter 1. If you should look through the old files of the old magazines, the first years of the present century, you will find, sandwiched in between the stories of Richard Arden Davis and Frank Norris, another long since dead, the work of one Geoffrey Curtin, a novel or two, and perhaps 3 or 4 dozen short stories. You could, if you were interested, follow them along until, say, 1908, when they suddenly disappeared. When you had read them all, you had been quite sure that here were no masterpieces. Here were passably amusing stories, a bit out of date now, but doubtless the sort that would have whiled away a dreary half hour in a dental office. The man who did them were of good intelligence, talented, glib, probably young. In the samples of his work, you found there would have been nothing to stir you to more than a faint interest in the whims of life. No deep interior life, no sense of futility or inner tragedy. After reading them, you'd yawn and put the number back in the files, and perhaps, if you were alone in some library reading them, you would decide that by way of variety you would look at a newspaper of the period and see whether the Japs had taken Port Arthur. But if by any chance the newspaper you had chosen were the right one, and had cracked open the theatrical page, your eyes would have been arrested and held, and for at least a minute you would have forgotten Port Arthur as quickly as you forgot Chateau Thierry. but you would by this fortunate chance be looking at the portrait of an exquisite woman. Those were the days of Florodora and her sextets, pinched-in waists and blown-out sleeves, with almost bustles and absolute ballet skirts. But here, without doubt, disguised as she may be by the unaccustomed stiffness and old-fashion of her costume, are a butterfly of butterflies. Here with the gaiety of the period, the soft wine of arts, the songs that florid arts, the toasts and the bouquets. Hey, Les. No, he's the lees of happiness, I'm afraid. Terribly sorry to disappoint you there. And it should be right in the stream title, although you can never tell with Twitch. Terribly sorry to let you know that you have such problems, my friend. Here with the gaiety of the period, the soft wine of ours, the songs that florid arts, the toasts in the back bouquets, the dances and the dinners. Here were a Venus of this handsome macabre, the Gibson girl in her glorious prime. Here were you, Fart, by looking at the name beneath, one Roxanne Millsbank, who had been chorus girl and understudy in The Daisy Chain, but who, by reason of an excellent performance when the star indisposed, had gained the leading part. You'd look again, and wonder why you'd never heard of her. Why did her name not linger in popular song and vaudeville jokes and cigar bands, and the memory of that gay old uncle of yours along with Lillian Runzel and Stella Mayhew and Anna Herald? Roxanne Millbank. Whither had she gone? What dark trapdoor had opened suddenly and swallowed her up? Her name was certainly not in last Sunday's supplement, or that list of actresses married to English noblemen. No doubt she was dead, poor beautiful young lady, and quite forgotten. I am hoping too much. I'm having you stumble on Geoffrey Curtin's stories and Roxanne Millbank's picture. It would be incredible that you should find a newspaper item 6 months later. A single item, 2 inches by 4, which informed the public of the marriage, very quietly. Miss Roxanne Millbank will be on tour with the Daisy Chain, and Mr. Geoffrey Curtin, the popular author. Mrs. Curtin, it added dispassionately, will retire from the stage. It were a marriage of love. He was sufficiently spoiled to be charming, she were ingenious enough to be irresistible. Like two floating logs they met in an head-on rush, caught and sped along together. Yet had Geoffrey Curtin kept her scribbling for 20 years, he could not have put in a quirk into one of his stories weirder than the quirk that come into his own life. Had Roxanne Millbank played 36 parts and filled 5,000 houses, she could never have had the role with more happiness and more despair than were in the fate prepared for Roxanne Curtin. For a year they lived in hotels, travelled to California, to Alaska, to Florida, to Mexico, loved and quarrelled gently, and gloried in the golden triflings of his wit and her beauty. They were young and gravely passionate. They had wanted everything, and then yielded everything again in ecstasies of unselfishness and pride. She loved the swift tones of his voice and his frantic, unfounded jealousy. He loved her dark radiance, the white irises of her eyes, the warm, lustrous enthusiasm of her smile. "Don't you like her?" he would demand, rather exultantly and shyly. "Isn't she wonderful? Did you ever see?" "Yes," they'd answer, grinning. "She's a wonder, you're lucky." The year passed. They tired of hotels. They bought an old house on 20 acres near the town of Marlow, half an hour from Chicago. Bought a little car and moved out, riotously with a pioneering hallucination that would have confounded Balboa. "Your room will be here," they cried in turn, and then, "and my room here, and the nursery here when we have children, and we'll build a sleeping porch out next year." They moved out in April. In July, Geoffrey's closest friend, Harry Cromwell, come to spend the week. They met him at the end of the long lawn and hurried him proudly to the house. Harry was married also. His wife had had a baby some 6 months before, and was still recuperating at her mother's in New York. Roxanne had gathered from Geoffrey that Harry's wife was not as attractive as Harry. Geoffrey had met her once and considered her shy. But Harry had been married nearly 2 years and were apparently happy, so Geoffrey guessed that she was probably all right. "I'm making biscuits," chatted Roxanne gravely. "Can your wife make biscuits? The cook is showing me how. I think every woman should know how to make biscuits. It sounds so utterly disarming, A woman who can make biscuits can surely not do no. You'll have to come and live here. You'll have to come out here and live, said Geoffrey. Get a place out in the country like us, for you and Kitty. Get out now, Kitty. She hates the country. She's got to have her theatres and her vaudevilles. Bring her out, repeated Geoffrey. We'll have a colony. There's an awfully nice crowd here already. Bring her out. They're at the porch steps now, and Roxanne made a brisk gesture towards a dilapidated structure on the right. The garage, she announced. It will also be Geoffrey's writing room within a month. Meanwhile, dinner is at 7. Meanwhile, to that I will mix a cocktail. The two men ascended the second floor. As they ascended halfway, but at the first landing, Geoffrey dropped his guest suitcase, and in a cross between a query and a cry, exclaimed, "For God's sake, Harry, how do you like that?" "We'll go upstairs," answered his guest, "and we'll shut the door." Half an hour later, as they were sitting together in the library, Roxanne reissued from the kitchen, bearing before her a pan of biscuits. Geoffrey and Harry rose. "They're beautiful, dear," said the husband intensely. "Exquisite," murmured Harry. Roxanne beamed. "Taste one. I couldn't bear to touch them before you'd seen them all, and I can't bear to take them back until I find what they taste like." "Like manna, darling." Simultaneously, the two men raised their biscuits to their lips, nibbled tentatively. Simultaneously, they tried to change the subject. But Roxanne, undeceived, set down the pan and seized a biscuit. After a second, her comment rang out with a lugubrious finality. "Absolutely bum." "Really? Well, I didn't notice." Roxanne roared. "Oh, I'm useless," she cried, laughing. "Turn me out, Geoffrey. I'm a parasite. I'm no good." Geoffrey put his arm around her. "Darling, I'll eat your biscuits." They're beautiful anyway," insisted Roxanne. They're decorative," suggested Harry. Geoffrey took him up wildly. "That's the word. They're decorative. They're masterpieces. We'll use them." He rushed to the kitchen and returned with an hammer and a handful of nails. "We'll use them, by golly, Roxanne. We'll make a frieze out of them." "Don't," wailed Roxanne. "Our beautiful house." "Never mind. We're going to have the library repapered in October, don't you remember?" "Well," bang! The first biscuit were impaled to the wall, quivered for a moment like a live thing. Bang! When Roxanne returned with a second round of cocktails, the biscuits were in a perpendicular row, 12 of them, like a collection of primitive spirits. "Roxanne," exclaimed Geoffrey, "you're an artist. Cook nonsense. You shall illustrate my books." During dinner, the twilight faltered into dusk, and later it was starry dark outside, filled and permeated with the frail gorgeousness of Roxanne's white dress, and a tremulous low laugh. Such a little girl she is, thought Harry. Not as old as Kitty. He compared the two. Kitty was nervous without being sensitive, temperamental without temperament, a woman who seemed to flit and never lie, and Roxanne, who was as young as a spring night and summed up in her own adolescent laughter. A good match for Geoffrey, he thought again. Two very young people, the sort who'll stay very young until they suddenly find themselves old. Harry thought these things between his constant thoughts about Kitty. He was depressed about Kitty. It seemed to him that she was well enough to come back to Chicago and bring his little son. He was thinking vaguely of Kitty when he said goodnight to his friend, his wife, and his friend at the foot of the stairs. "You're our first real house guest," called Roxanne after him. "Aren't you thrilled and proud?" When he were out of sight, around the stair corner, she turned to Geoffrey, who was standing beside her, resting his hand on the end of the banister. "Are you tired, my dearest?" Geoffrey rubbed the centre of his forehead with his finger. "A little. How did you know?" "Oh, how could I help knowing about you?" "It's a headache," he said moodily. "And splitting. I'll take some aspirin." She reached over and snapped out the light. With his arm tight about her waist, they walked up the stairs together. That's the end of chapter 1. I'll have a quick swallow of water and we'll give some thoughts. Right then, so we have a young couple all come together, both with some sort of artistic background, and both apparently disappearing from public life quite dramatically in some future instalment. They're apparently quite happy in a minute. which sets us up for a classic tragedy, it seems. An ill end preordained for them. Still, no sense in holding off on it, shall we press on? Chapter 2. Harry's week passed. They drove about the dreaming lanes, or idled in cheerful and sat inanity upon the lake or lawn. In the evenings, Roxanne, sitting inside, played to them, while the ashes whitened on the glowing ends of their cigars. There came a telegram from Kitty, saying that she wanted Harry to come east and to get her. So Roxanne and Geoffrey were left alone in the privacy of which they never seemed to tire. Alone thrilled them again. They wandered about the house, each feeling intimately the presence of the other. They sat on the same side of the table like honeymooners. They was intensely absorbed, intensely happy. The town of Marlow, though a comparatively old settlement, only recently acquired a society. 5 or 6 years before, alarmed at the smoky swelling of Chicago, 2 or 3 young married couples, bungalow people, had moved out. Their friends had followed. The Geoffrey Curtains found an already formed set, prepared to welcome them. A country club, ballroom, and golf links yawned for them, and there were bridge parties and poker parties, and parties where they drank beer, and parties where they drank nothing at all. They were at a poker party that they found themselves a week after Harry's departure. There was 2 tables, and a good proportion of the young wives were smoking and shouting their bets, and being very daringly managed for those days. Roxanne had left the game early and taken the perambulation. She wandered into the pantry and found herself some grape juice. Beer gave her an headache. Then passed from table to table, looking over shoulders at the hands, keeping an eye on Geoffrey and being pleasantly unexcited and content. Geoffrey, with intense concentration, was raising a pile of chips of all colours, and Roxanne knew by the deepened wrinkles between his eyes that he was interested. She liked to see him interested in small things. She crossed over quietly and sat down on the arm of his chair. She sat there 5 minutes, listening to the sharp intermittent comments of the men and the chatter of women, which rose from the table like soft smoke. Yet scarcely hearing either. And quite innocently she reached out her hand, intending to place it on Geoffrey's shoulder. As it touched him, he started, of a sudden, gave a short grunt and, sweeping back his arm furiously, caught her a glancing blow on the elbow. There were a general gasp. Roxanne regained her balance, gave a little cry, and rose quickly to her feet. It had been the greatest shock of her life. This from Geoffrey, the art of kindness, of consideration, this instinctively brutal gesture. The gasp became a silence. A dozen eyes was turned on Geoffrey, who looked up as though seeing Roxanne for the first time. An expression of bewilderment settled on his face. "Why, that Roxanne," he said ultimately. Into a dozen minds entered a quick suspicion, a rumour of scandal. Could it be that behind the scenes, with this couple, apparently so in love, lurked some curious antipathy? Why else this streak of fire across such a cloudless heaven? "Geoffrey!" Roxanne's voice was pleading. Startled and horrified, yet she knew that it was a mistake. No one to let occur to her to blame him or resent him. Her words were a tremendous supplication. "Tell me, Geoffrey," he said. "Tell Roxanne, your own Roxanne." "Why, Roxanne?" began Geoffrey again. The bored look changed to pain. "You're clearly as startled as she." "I didn't intend that," he went on. "But you startled me. I felt as if someone were attacking me. How idiotic." They was both on their feet. They were saying goodbye, faltering, apologising, explaining. When I attempted to pass it off, easily, that way lay sacrilege. Geoffrey had not been feeling well, they said. He had become nervous. Back of both their minds were the unexplained horror of that blow, a marvel. That there had been for an instant something between them, his anger and her fear. Now that both, a sorrow, momentarily, no doubt, had been bridged at once while there were yet time. That swift water lashing under their feet, the fierce glint of some uncharted chasm. Out in their car, under the harvest moon, he talked brokenly. It was just incomprehensible to him, he said. He'd been thinking of the poker game, absorbed, and the touch on his shoulder had seemed like an attack. An attack. He clung that word, flung up as a shield. He had hated what touched him. With the impact of his hand, it had gone, that nervousness. That were all he knew. Both their eyes filled with tears, and they whispered love. And they whispered love there under the broad night of the serene streets of Marlow. Sped by. Later, when they went to bed, it was quite calm. Geoffrey would have taken a week off work, simply to loll and sleep, and go on long walks until the nervousness left him. When they had decided this, safety settled down upon Roxanne. The pillows under her head became soft and friendly. The bed on which they lay seemed wide and white, and sturdy beneath the radiance that streamed in at the window. 5 days later, in the first cool of late afternoon, Geoffrey picked up an oak chair and sent it crashing through his own front window. Then he lay down on the couch like a child, weeping piteously and begging to die. A blood clot the size of a marble had broken in his brain. That's the end of chapter 2. Well, fuck. I mean, I said it was set up for a tragedy, but that was a bit of a quicker turnaround than I expected. Let me have a swallow of water. So, a brain aneurysm. Brain aneurysms is one of the most terrifying things in the world, because it's very hard to detect before they happen. They can be an intensely rapid way to die, and there's really no way to... I don't know. Let's not dwell on that, actually. They are really quite an unpleasant sort of subject. But, yeah. Feel pretty bad for the poor fella. Anyhow, But yeah, so there's a quick build-up and an explosion. Let's press on with things, shall we? Chapter 3. There is a sort of waking nightmare that sets in sometimes when one is missed, when one has missed a sleep or two. A feeling that comes with extreme fatigue and a new sun. The quality of the life around has changed. It is a fully articulate conviction that somehow the existence one is then leading is a branch shoot of life. It's related to life only as a moving picture or a mirror. The people and streets and houses are only projections from a very dim and chaotic past. It were in such a state that Roxanne found herself during the first months of Geoffrey's illness. She slept only when she were utterly exhausted. She awoke under a cloud. The long, sober-voiced consultations, the faint aura of medicine in the halls, the sudden tiptoeing in an house that had echoed to many cheerful footsteps, and most of all, Geoffrey's white face amid the pillows of the bed they had shared. These things subdued her and made her indelibly older. The doctors held out hope, but that were all. A long rest, they said, and quiet. So responsibility come to Roxanne. It was she who paid the bills, pored over his bank book, corresponded with his publishers. She were in the kitchen constantly. She learned from the nurse how to prepare his meals, and after the first month, took complete charge of the sick room. She had to let the nurse go for reasons of economy. One of the two coloured girls left at the same time. Roxanne were realising they had been living from a short story to short story. The most frequent visitor were Harry Cromwell. He had been shocked and depressed by the news, and though his wife were now living with him in Chicago, he found time to come out several times a month. Roxanne found his sympathy welcome. There was some quality of suffering in the man, some inherent pitifulness, that made her comfortable when he were near. Roxanne's nature had suddenly deepened. She felt sometimes that with Geoffrey she were losing her children also, the children that now most of all she needed and should have had. It was 6 months after Geoffrey's collapse, and when the nightmare had faded, leaving not the old world but a new one, greyer and colder, that she went to see Harry's wife. Finding herself in Chicago with an extra hour before train time, she decided out of courtesy to call. As she stepped inside the door, she had an immediate impression that the apartment was very like some place she'd seen before, and almost instantly she remembered the round-the-corner bakery of her childhood. A bakery full of rows and rows of pink frosted cakes. A stuffy pink, pink as food, pink triumphant, vulgar and odious. And this apartment was like that. It was pink. It smelled pink. Mrs. Cromwell, attired in a wrapper of pink and black, opened the door. Her hair was yellow, heightened, Roxanne imagined, by a dash of peroxide in the rinsing water every week. Her eyes were a thin, waxen blue. She was pretty and too consciously graceful. Her cordiality was strident and intimate. Hostility melted so quickly to hospitality, and it seemed they were both merely in the face of a voice, never touching, nor touched by the deep core of egotism beneath. But to Roxanne, these things were secondary. Her eyes was caught and held in uncanny fascination by the wrapper. It was vilely unclean. From its lower stem up 4 inches, it was sheerly dirty, with the blue dust of the floor. For the next 3 inches, it was grey. Then it shaded off into its natural colour, which was pink. It was dirty at the sleeves too, and the collar. When the woman turned to lead the way into the parlour, Roxanne was sure that her neck was dirty. A one-sided rattle of conversation begun. Mrs. Cromwell became explicit about her likes and dislikes, her head, her stomach, her teeth, her apartment, avoiding with a sort of insolent meticulousness any inclusion of Roxanne with life, as if presuming Roxanne, having been dealt a blow, wished to be carefully skirted. Roxanne smiled. That kimono, that neck. After 5 minutes, a little boy toddled into the parlour. A dirty little boy, clad in dirty pink romper. His face was smudgy. Roxanne wanted to take him into her lap and wipe his nose. Other parts, in the vicinity of his head, needed attention. His tiny shoes were kicked out at the toes. Unspeakable. "What a darling little boy," exclaimed Roxanne, smiling radiantly. "Come here to me." Mrs. Cromwell looked coldly at her son. "He will get dirty. Look at that face." She had her head to one side, as regarding critically. "Isn't he a darling?" repeated Roxanne. "Look at his romper," frowned Mrs. Cromwell. "You need to change, don't you, George?" George stared at her curiously. To his mind, the word romper connected a connotated garment extraneously smeared as this one. "I tried to make him look respectable this morning," complained Mrs. Cromwell, "as one whose patience had been sorely tried, when I found he didn't have any more rompers. So rather than have him go around without any, I put him back in those, and his face." "How many pairs has he?" Roxanne's voice was pleasantly curious. "How many feather fans have you?" she might have asked. "Oh," Mrs. Cromwell considered, wrinkling her pretty brow. "5, I think. Plenty, I know." "You can get them for 50 cents a pair." Mrs. Cromwell's eyes showed surprise, and the faintest superiority. The price of rompers. "Can you really? I had no idea. I ought to have plenty, but I haven't had a minute all week to send the laundry out." Then, dismissing the subject as irrelevant, "I must show you some things." They rose, and Roxanne followed her past an open bathroom door, whose garment-littered floor showed indeed that laundry hadn't been sent out for some time, into another room that was, so to speak, the quintessence of pinkness. This was Miss Cromwell's room. Here the hostess opened a closet and displayed before Roxanne's eyes an amazing collection of lingerie. There was dozens of flimsy marvels of lace and silk, all clean, unruffled, seemingly not yet touched. On hangers beside them there were new evening dresses. "I have some beautiful things," said Mrs. Cromwell, "but not much of a chance to wear them. Harry doesn't care about going out." A spark crept into her voice. "He's perfectly content to let me play nursemaid and housekeeper all day, and loving wife in the evening." Roxanne smiled again. "You've got some beautiful clothes here." "Yes, I have. Let me show you." "Beautiful," repeated Roxanne, interrupting her. "But I'll have to run if I'm going to catch my train." She felt that her hands were trembling. She wanted to put them on this woman and shake her. Shake her! She wanted her locked up somewhere and set to scrubbing floors. Beautiful, she repeated. I just came in for a moment. Well, I'm sorry Harry isn't here. They moved towards the door. And oh, said Roxanne with an effort. Yet her voice was still gentle and her lips were smiling. I think it's Argyle's where you can get those rompers. Goodbye. Well, not until she had reached the station and bought her ticket to Marlow, Roxanne realised that for the first 5 minutes in 6 months that her mind had been off Geoffrey. That's the end of chapter 3. Another swallow of water. Tragedy on tragedy. Leaves of sad happiness indeed. Right then, pressing on again. Chapter 4. A week later, Harry appeared at Marlow, arrived unexpectedly at 5 o'clock, and coming up the walk, sank into a porch chair in a state of exhaustion. Roxanne herself had a busy day, and were worn out. The doctor's was coming at 5:30, bringing a celebrated nerve specialist from New York. She was excited and thoroughly depressed, but Harry's eyes made her sit down beside him. What's the matter? Nothing, Roxanne, he denied. I've come to see how Geoffrey were doing. Don't you bother about me. Harry, insisted Roxanne, there's something the matter. Nothing, he repeated. How's Jeff? Anxiety darkened her face. He's a little worse, Harry. Dr. Jewett had someone come from New York. I thought he could tell me something definite. He's going to try and find whether this paralysis has anything to do with the original blood count. Harry rose. Oh, I'm sorry, he said jerkily. Didn't know you expected a consultation. I wouldn't have come. Thought I'd just rock on your porch for an hour. Sit down, she commanded. Harry hesitated. Sit down, Harry, dear boy. Her kindness flooded out now, enveloped him. I know there's something the matter. You're white as a sheet. I'm going to get you a cool bottle of beer. All at once he collapsed into his chair and covered his face with his hands. I can't make her happy, he said slowly. I've tried and I've tried. This morning we had some words about breakfast. I've been getting my breakfast downtown and, well, just after I went to the office she left the house. Went east to her mother's with George and a suitcase full of lace underwear. Harry, and I don't know. There were a crunch on the gravel. The car turned into the drive. Roxanne uttered a little cry. It's Dr. Jewett. You'll wait, won't you? She interrupted abstractedly. He saw that his problems had already died on the troubled surface of her mind. There were an embarrassed minute of vague, elided introductions, and Harry followed the party inside and watched them disappear up the stairs. He went into the library and sat down on the big sofa. For an hour he watched the sun creep up the patterned folds, the chintz curtains. In the deep quiet, a trapped wasp buzzing on the inside of the window pane assumed the proportions of a clamour. From time to time another buzzing drifted down from upstairs, resembling several more larger wasps caught on larger window panes. He heard low footfalls, the clink of bottles, the clamour of pouring water. What had he and Roxanne done that life should deal these crashing blows to them? Upstairs there had taken place a livid inquest on the soul of his friend. He was sitting here in a quiet room, listening to the plaint of a wasp, just as when he were a boy he had been compelled by strict aunt to sit hour long on a chair in atone for some misbehaviour. But who had put him here? What ferocious aunt had leaned out of the sky to make him atone for what? About Kitty he felt a great hopelessness. She was too expensive. That the irredeemable difficulty. Suddenly he hated her. He wanted to throw her down and kick at her, to tell her she were a cheat and a leech, that she were dirty. Moreover, she must give him his boy. He rose and began pacing up and down the room. Simultaneously, he heard someone begin walking along the hallway upstairs, in exact time with him. He found himself wondering if they would walk in time until the person reached the end of the hall. Kitty had gone to her mother. God help her, what a mother to go to. He tried to imagine the meal, the abused wife collapsing upon the mother's breast. He could not. That Kitty were capable of any deep grief were unbelievable. He had gradually grown to think of her as something unapproachable and callous. She would get a divorce, of course, and eventually she would marry again. He began to consider this. Whom would she marry? He laughed bitterly. Stopped. A picture flashed before him of Kitty's arms around some man whose face he could not see. And Kitty's lips pressed closer to other lips in what was surely passion. God, he cried aloud. God, God, God. And the pictures come thick and fast. The Kitty of this morning faded. The soiled kimono rolled up and disappeared. The pats and rages and tears all was washed away. Again she were Kitty Carr with yellow hair and pretty baby and great baby eyes. Ah, she had loved him. She had loved him. After a while he perceived that something were amiss with him. Something that had nothing to do with Kitty or Jeff. Something of a different genre. Amazingly, it burst on him at last. He were hungry. Simple enough. He would go into the kitchen in a moment and ask the coloured cook for a sandwich. After that, he must go back to the city. He paused at the wall, jerked at something round and, fingering it absently, put it into his mouth and tasted it as a baby tastes a bright toy. His teeth closed on it. Ah. She'd left that damn kimono. A dirty pink kimono. She might have had the decency to take it with her, he thought. It would hang in the house now like a corpse of their sick alliance. He would try to throw it away, would never be able to bring himself to move it. It would be like Kitty, soft and pliable, with all impervious. He couldn't move Kitty. He couldn't reach Kitty. There were nothing there to reach. He understood that perfectly. He had understood it all along. He reached to the wall for another biscuit, and with effort pulled it out, nail and all. He carefully removed the nail from the centre, wondering idly if he had eaten the nail with the first biscuit. Preposterous, he well remembered. It were a huge nail. He felt his stomach. He must be very hungry. He considered, remembered. Yesterday he had had no dinner. With the girls' day out, Kitty had lain in her room eating chocolate drops. She had said she felt smothery and couldn't bear having him near her. He had given George a bath and put him to bed, and then laid down on the couch, intending to rest a minute before getting his own dinner. There he had fallen asleep and awakened about 11, to find there were nothing in the icebox except a spoonful of potato salad. This he had eaten, together with some chocolate drops that he found on Kitty's bureau. This morning he had breakfast hurriedly downtown before going to the office. But at noon, beginning to worry about Kitty, he had decided to go home and take her out to lunch. After that, there had been a note on his pillow. The pile of lingerie in the closet were gone, and she had left instructions for tending her trunk. He had never been so hungry, he thought. At 5 o'clock, when the visiting nurse tipped out downstairs, he was sitting on the sofa, staring at the carpet. Mr. Cromwell? Yeah, yes? Oh, Miss Curtin won't be able to see you at dinner. She's not well. She told me to tell you that the cook will fix you something. There's a spare bedroom. She's sick, you say? She's lying down in her room. The consultation is just over. Did they decide anything? Yes, said the nurse softly. Dr. Jewett says there's no hope. Mr. Curtin may live indefinitely, but he'll never see again, or move again, or think. He'll just breathe. Just breathe. Yes. I'll pause there because the ads is about to come on. I'll have my swallow of water. Cheers to all of you, Ralph.
Ah, the rat!
Abbe, welcome in. You're just in time for our first ad break. Hope you're doing well. That's fine. You don't owe me your attendance, Abba. Every time you turn up, at whatever time you turn up, it's a gift. I appreciate it greatly. But, yeah, you come in most of the way through our first story, but I think we're going to have time for the second, so that'll be good. What is there to say of the first story? We followed a young couple, one of whom was a writer of no great particular talent, but of some small note and profession, and a young actress of apparently striking beauty, and some breakout role, though some retire from stage, where they, lived the first year of their marriage very happily, a very happy marriage all told. Retired out to a little suburb outside of Chicago, about 30 minutes. Had a friend over to visit. There was some sign of the fellow having a headache. Friend went back, and then at a poker party a week after that fact, she startled him by accident, sort of touched his shoulder, and he sort of swiped at her and struck her, which sort of shocked them both because there was a real moment of terror in it. He decided to have a week of bed rest, took off from work, and then 5 days later a blood clot in his brain burst, and he threw a chair through the window, collapsed on the sofa and begged to die, and since then has been sort of bedridden and being seen by doctors. Meanwhile, over with the friend, who himself was just recently married and had a kid, we see in the suburb, or in the city of Chicago, I should say, where we have a brief visitation of the wife of the man who is now sick and who's taking care of things with the wife of the friend, and finds the apartment is in a state of disarray. Her child is in a dirty romper because she hasn't bothered to clean properly or send away laundry. And then we come back over to the house where the friend of the family is visiting to tell her that his wife has left, has gone with their child back to New York, taken them away with almost no notice, taken all her expensive clothes and nothing else. At the same time, on the same day, I should say, a specialist doctor from New York is visiting the man himself to check on his brain and see if anything's to be done. We've just found out, as this man, the visiting man, I should say, whose name is Henry, has a breakdown, that there's no hope, that the brain damage is sort of irreversible, and that while the wife of the actress, the writer, might live indefinitely, he will never see, never think, never do anything but breathe ever again. And that's where we're at. So yeah. You've missed quite a depressing story, Abbe. But yeah. Other than that, I don't think there's much to say. Ooh. And that, oh look, and that's almost the entirety of the ads in a little summary, which also sums up my story, my feelings and things. So, that's a good little thing. Anyway, drink of water. There we are. And we press right on along. Just breathe. Yes. For the first time, the nurse noticed that beside the writing desk, where she remembered that there she had seen a line of a dozen curious round objects she had vaguely imagined to be some exotic form of decoration. There were now only one. Where the others had been, there were now a series of little nail holes. Harry followed her glance dazedly, and rose to his feet. I don't believe he'll stay. I believe there's a train. She nodded. Harry picked up his hat. Goodbye, she said pleasantly. Good boy, he answered, as though talking to himself, and evidently moved by some involuntary necessity. He paused on his way to the door, and she saw him pluck the last object from the wall and drop it into his pocket. Then he opened the screen door and, descending the porch steps, passed out of her sight. Should have mentioned that, just to give you some context, Abbo. Those objects that was on the wall were homemade biscuits that the wife made before the old incident when he was visiting the first time, which were so bad they was inedible, and there was a little romantic little thing where they were like, well, they look so good, we'll hang them on the wall 6 months ago. And then in his despair, this man who was visiting has eaten all 11 of those missing ones, which is just a symptom of what's going on with him. But yeah. Anyhow, chapter 5. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 4, I should say. I've just summarised everything, so we'll press right on to chapter 5. After a while, a coat of clean white paint on the Jeffrey Curtin house made a definite compromise with the suns of many Julys, and showed its good faith by turning grey. It scaled, huge peelings of very brittle old paint, leaned over backwards like aged men practising grotesque gymnastics. and finally dropped to a mouldy death in the overgrown grass beneath. The paint on the front pillars becomes streaky. The white ball were knocked off the left-hand doorpost. The green blinds darkened, they lost all pretense of colour. It began to be an house that were avoided by the tender-minded. Some church bought a lot diagonally opposite for a graveyard, and this, combined with the place where Mr. Curtin stays with that living corpse, were enough to throw a ghostly aura over the quarter of the road. Not that she were left alone. Men and women come to see her, met her downtown where she went to do her marketing, brought her home in their cars, come in for a moment to talk, and the rest in the glamour that still played in her smile. The men who did not know her no longer followed her with admiring glances in the street. A diaphanous veil had come down over her beauty, destroying its vividness, yet bringing neither wrinkles nor fat. She acquired a character in the village. A group of little stories were told of her. How when the country were frozen over one winter so that no wagons or automobiles could travel, she taught herself to escape so that she could make quick time with the grocer and druggist and not leave Geoffrey alone for long. It was said that every night since his paralysis she slept in a small bed beside his bed, holding his hand. Geoffrey Curtin was spoken of as though he were already dead. As the years dropped by, those who had known him died or moved away. There was but half a dozen of the old crowd who had drunk cocktails together, called each other's wives by their first names. I thought that Jeff were about the wittiest and most talented fellow that Marlowe had ever known. Now, for the casual visitor, he were merely the reason that Mrs. Curtins excused herself sometimes and hurried upstairs. His were a groan or a sharp cry born of the silent parlour and the heavy air of a Sunday afternoon. He could not move. He was stone blind, dumb and totally unconscious. All day he lay in his bed, except for a shift to his wheelchair every morning while she straightened the room. His paralysis were creeping slowly towards his heart. At first, for the first year, Roxanne had received the faintest answering pressure sometimes when she held his hand. Then it had gone, ceased one evening, and never come back. No, and through 2 nights Roxanne lay wide-eyed, staring into the dark, and wondering what had gone, what fraction of his soul had taken flight, what last grain of comprehension those shattered, broken nerves still carried to the brain. After that, hope died. If it had not been for her unceasing care, the last spark would have gone long before. Every morning she shaved and bathed him, shifted him with her own hands from the bed to chair and back to bed. She were in his room constantly, bearing medicine, straightening the pillow, talking to him almost as one talks to a nearly human dog, without hope of response or appreciation, with the dim persuasion of habit, a prayer when faith has gone. Not a few people, one celebrated nerve specialist among them, gave her a plain impression that it were futile exercise, so much care, that if Geoffrey had been conscious he would have wished to die, if his spirit were hovering in some wider air. He would agree to no such sacrifice from her, would fret only for the prison of its body to give it full release. But you see, she replied, shaking her head gently, when I married Geoffrey it was until I ceased to love him. But, was protested in effect, you can't love that. I can love what it once was. What else is there for me to do? The specialist shrugged his shoulders and went away to say that Miss Scarton was a remarkable woman, and just about as sweet as an angel, but he added, it were a terrible pity. There must be some man, or a dozen, just crazy to take care of her. Casually there were. Here and there someone begun to hope, and ended in reverence. There were no love in the woman, except strangely enough for life, for the people in the world, from the tramp to whom she gave food she could ill afford, to the butcher who showed her a cheap cut of steak across the meaty board. The other phase was sealed up somewhere between the expressionless mummery who laid with his face turned ever towards the light, as mechanically as a compass needle, and waited dumbly for the last wave to wash over his heart. After 11 years he died in the middle of a May night, from the scent of the syringa hung upon the windowsill, and a breeze wafted in the shrilling of the frog and cicadas outside. Roxanne awoke at 2 and realised with a start that she were alone in the house at last. That's the end of... Again, the next chapter is listed as chapter 4, but that was chapter 5 that we just ended. Some of these are sort of oddly mislabeled, some of them. Anyhow, let's have a drink of water. Lord Almighty. Couldn't happen to a better person, unfortunately. Someone less deserving of the cruelty and tragedy. Still, only a few more pages to the end of the story and then we'll press on to the next. So, chapter 6. After that, she sat on her weather-beaten porch for many afternoons, gazing down across the fields that undulated in slow descent of the white and green town. She was wondering what she would do with her life. She was 36, handsome, strong and free. The years had eaten up Geoffrey's insurance. She had reluctantly parted with the acre to the right and left of her, and even placed a small mortgage on the house. With her husband's death had come a great physical restlessness. She missed having to care for him in the mornings. She missed her rush to town and the brief and therefore accentuated neighbourly meetings in the butchers and grocers. She missed the cooking for 2, the preparation of delicate liquid food for him. One day, consumed with energy, she went out and spaded up the old garden, a thing that had not been done for years. And she were alone at night in the room that had seen the glory of her marriage and then the pain. To meet Jeff again, she went back in spirit to that wonderful year, that intense, passionate absorption and companionship, rather than look forward to a problematical meeting thereafter. She woke often to lie and wish for that presence beside her, inanimate yet breathing, still Jeff. One afternoon, 6 months after his death, she was sitting on the porch in a black dress which took away the faint suggestion of plumpness from her figure. It were Indian summer, golden brown all about her, an hush broken by the sighting of leaves. Westward, a 4 o'clock sun dripped in streaks of red and yellow over a flaming sky. Most of the birds had gone. Only a sparrow that had built itself a nest on the cornice of the pillar kept up an intermittent cheeping, varied by occasional fluttering sallies over it. Roxanne moved her chair to where she could watch him, and her mind idled drowsily on the bosom of the afternoon. Harry Cromwell were coming out from Chicago to dinner. Since his divorce, over 8 years before, he'd been a frequent visitor. They had kept up what amounted to a tradition between them. When he arrived, they would go look at Jeff. Harry would sit down on the edge of the bed, and an hearty voice asked, "Well, Jeff, old man, how do you feel today?" Roxanne, standing beside, would look intently at Jeff, dreaming that some shadowy recognition of his former friend had passed across that broken mind. But the head, pale, carven, would only move slowly in its sole gesture towards the light, as if something behind the blind eyes were groping for another light long since gone out. These visits stretched over 8 years, at Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving, on many Sundays. Harry had arrived, paid his call on Jeff, and then talked for a long while with Roxanne on the porch. You were devoted to her. You made no pretense of hiding, no attempt to deceive, to deepen this relation. She was his best friend, as the mass of flesh on the bed there had been his best friend. She were peace, she were rest, she were the past. Of his own tragedy, she alone knew. He had been at the funeral, but since then the company for which he worked had shifted him to the east, and only a business trip had brought him to the vicinity of Chicago. Roxanne had written him to come when he could. After a night in the city, he had caught a train out. They shook hands. "Blake, welcome in. Good to have you. Hope you're doing well. You're just catching the very end of The Leaves of Happiness, which is a very depressing story. But in a page and change, we will be switching over to an alcoholic case, so that's something to look forward to. Thank you for coming by. I do appreciate it. Roxanne had written him to come when he could. After a night in the city, he caught a train out. They shook hands and he helped her to move 2 rockets together. How's George? He's fine, Roxanne. Seems to like school. Of course, it was the only thing to do to send him. Of course. You miss him horribly, Harry? Yes, I do miss him. He's a funny boy. He talked a lot about George. Roxanne were interested. Harry must bring him out on his next vacation. She had only seen him once in her life, a child in a dirty romper. She left him with a newspaper while she prepared dinner. She had 4 chops tonight and some late vegetables from her own garden. She put it all on and then called him and sat them down together. They continued their talk about George. If I had a child, she would say. Afterwards, Harry, having given her what slender advice he could about investments, they walked through the garden, pausing here and there to recognise what had once been a cement bench where the tennis court had lain. Do you remember? Then they were off in a flood of remembrances. The day they had taken all the snapshots, and Jeff had been photographed astride the calf, and the sketch Harry had made of Jeff and Roxanne lying sprawled in the grass, their heads almost touching. There were to have been a covered lattice connecting the barn studio with the house, so that Jeff could get there on wet days. The lattice had been started, but nothing remained except a broken triangular piece that still adhered to the house and resembled a battered chicken coop. And those meant tulips on Jeff's notebook. Do you remember how he'd laugh? And those meant tulips on Jeff's notebook. Do you remember how he'd laugh, Harry, when he'd get it out of his pocket and read out a page of material? And how frantic he used to get. Wild. He was such a kid about his writing. They were both silent a moment, and then Harry said, "We were to have a place out here too, do you remember? We used to buy the adjoining 20 acres, and the parties we were going to have." Again there were a pause, broken this time by a low question from Roxanne. "Do you ever hear of her, Harry?" "Oh yes," he admitted placidly. "She's in Seattle. She's married again to a man named Horton, a sort of lumber king. He's a great deal older than she is, I believe. And she's behaving?" "Yes. At least I've heard so. She has everything now, you see. Not much to do except to dress up with this fellow at dinner time." "I see." Without effort, he changed the subject. "You're going to keep the home?" "I think so," she said, nodding. "I've lived here so long, Harry, and it seemed terrible to move. I thought of trained nursing, but of course that'd mean leaving. I've about decided to be a boarding house lady." "Live in one?" "No, keep one." "Is there such an anomaly as a boarding lady?" "Is that, yeah. Anyway, I'd have Negroes and keep about 8 people in the summer, and 2 or 3 if I can get them in the winter. Of course, I'll have to have the house repainted and gone over inside." Harry considered. "Roxanne, naturally you know best what you can do, but it does seem a shock, Roxanne. You came here as a bride." "Perhaps," she said. "That's why I don't mind remaining here as a boarding house lady." "Oh, you remember a certain batch of biscuits?" "Oh, those biscuits," she cried. "Still, from all I heard about the way you devoured them, they couldn't have been so bad. I was so low that day. Somehow I laughed when the nurse told me about those biscuits. I noticed that the 12 nail holes are still in the library wall where Jeff drove them." "Yes." "We're getting very dark now." A Christmas settled in the air. A little gust of wind sent down a last spray of leaves. Roxanne shivered slightly. "We'd better go in." He looked at his watch. "It's late. I got to be leaving. I go east tomorrow." "Must you?" They lingered for a moment, just below the stoop, watching a moon that seemed full of snow float out in the distance, where the lake lay. Summer were gone, and now Indian summer. The grass was cold, and there were no mist and no dew. After he left, she would go in and light the gas and close the shutters, and he would go down the path and onto the village. To these two, life had come quickly and gone, leaving not bitterness but pity, not disillusion but only pain. There were already enough moonlight when they shook hands for each to see the gathered kindness in the other's eyes. And that's the end of the Leaves of Happiness. I want that an upbeat sort of story, yeah? Oof. A group of perfectly happy people who seemed nice enough by the standard of Fitzgerald's well-off people. And then one of them has a brain aneurysm and one of them has his life fall apart because his wife is unhappy. And they go on living the rest of their lives. The best of people, unable to recover from it, unable to repair, unable to heal, miserable for nothing. What a world, eh? A very well written story, a decidedly well written story. I'm miserable at the core of it, eh? I mean, I guess we asked for it, or I asked for it. It's called The Leaves of Happiness. Can't really blame it, can you? Anyhow, let me have a drink of water and we'll move on to an alcoholic case. I think we've got time. Now, this one's only 8 pages, so it should be pretty quick. Might just about bring us up to the hour. So, an alcoholic case. Chapter 1. Let go that... Oh, please now, will you? Don't start drinking again. Come on, give me the bottle. I told you I'd stay awake giving it to you. Come on. If you like that away, then what are you going to be like when you go home? Come on, leave it with me. I'll leave half the bottle, half in the bottle. Please, you know what Dr. Carter says. I'll stay awake and give it to you, or else fix some of it in the bottle. Come on. Like I told you, I'm too tired to be fighting you all night. Alright, drink your old fool self to death. Would you like some? He asked. No, I don't want any beer. I don't think that I have to look at you drunk again, my God. Then I'll drink the Coca-Cola. Go sat down, panting on the bed. Don't you believe in anything? She demanded. Nothing you believe in? Please, it'll spill. She had no business there, she thought. No business in trying to help him. Again they struggled. After this time he sat with his head in his hands a while before he turned around. Once more. Once more you try to get it, I'll throw it down, she said quickly. I will. On the tiles in the bathroom. Then I'll step on the broken glass, or you'll step on it. Then let go. Oh, you promised. Suddenly she dropped it like a torpedo, sliding underneath her hand and slithering with a flash of red and black. And the words, Sir Galahad, distilled Louisville gin. He took it by the neck and tossed it through the open door of the bathroom. You're on the floor in pieces, and everything was silent for a while. And she read Gone with the Wind, about things so lovely that happened so long ago. She began to worry that he would have to go into the bathroom and might cut his feet, and looked up from time to time to see if he would go in. She was very sleepy. The last time she looked up, he was crying. He looked like an old Jewish man she had nursed once in California. He had to go to the bathroom many times. On this case she was unhappy all the time, but she thought, I guess if I hadn't liked him I wouldn't have stayed on the case. With sudden resurgence of conscience she got up, put a chair in front of the bathroom door. She had wanted to sleep because he had got her up early that morning to get a paper. The story of the Yale Dartmouth game in it, and she hadn't been home all day. That afternoon, a relative of his had come to see him, and she had waited outside in the hall, where they were draught with no sweater to put over her uniform. As well as she could, she arranged him for sleeping, put a robe over his shoulder as he sat slumped over his writing table, and one on his knees. She sat down in the rocker, but he was no longer sleepy. There were plenty who went her on the jar, and treading lightly about, she found a pencil and put it down. Pulse 120, respiration 25, temp 98 to 98.4, 98.2. Remarks. She could make so many. Tried to get a bottle of gin, threw it away and broke it. She corrected it to read, in the struggle it dropped and was broken. Patient was generally difficult. She started to add, as part of her report, "I never want to go on an alcoholic case again." That one in the picture. She knew she could wake herself at 7 and clean up everything before his niece awakened. They were all part of the game. When she sat down in the chair, she looked at his face, white and exhausted, and counted his breathings again, and wondered why it had all happened. He'd been so nice today, drawn her an old strip of his cartoon just for fun and given it to her. She was going to have it framed and hang it in her room. She felt again his thin wrists resting against her wrist, and remembered the awful things he had said. And she thought too of what the doctor had said to him yesterday. "You're too good a man to do this to yourself." She was tired and didn't want to clean up the glass on the bathroom floor, because as soon as he breathed evenly, she wanted to get him over the bed. But she decided finally to clean up the glass first, on her knees, searching for a last piece of it. She thought, "This isn't what I ought to be doing. This isn't what he ought to be doing." Resentfully, she stopped and regarded him. Through the thin, delicate profile of his nose came a light snore, sighing, remote, inconsolable. The doctor had shaken his head a certain way, and she knew that it really were a case that was beyond her. Besides, on her cards at the agency were written on the advice of her elders, "No alcoholics." She'd done her old duty, but all she could think was that when she was struggling about the room with him, with that gin bottle, there had been a pause, when he asked her if she had hurt her elbow against the door, and she had answered, "You don't know how people talk about you, no matter how you think of yourself." And she knew he had a long time ceased to care about such things. The glass were all collected. As she got out of her room to make sure, she realised the glass and its fragments were less than a window through which they had seen each other for a moment. He did not know about her sister, and Bill Marco, whom she had almost married, and she didn't know what had brought him to this pitch, and there were a picture on his bureau of his young wife and his 2 sons, and him all trim and handsome as he must have been 5 years ago. It was so utterly senseless, as she put a bandage on her finger where she had cut it while picking up the glass. She made up her mind she would never take an alcoholic case again. And that's the end of chapter 1. You know, when I heard the phrase "an alcoholic case," in my head it was going to be a detective story of some kind. I never considered a medical case. Grim stories, and one after the other, it would seem, huh? Lord, well. Pressing on. Chapter 2. You were early the next evening. Some Halloween jokester had split the side window of the bus, and she shifted back to the Negro sections in the rear for fear of the glass might fall out. She had her patience checked, but nowhere to cash it at this hour. There were a quarter and a penny in her purse. 2 nurses she knew were waiting in the hall of Mr. Hickson's agency. "What kind of case have you been on?" "Alcoholic," she said. "Oh yes, Greta Hawkes told me about it. You're on with that cartoonist who lives at the Forest Park Inn?" "Yes, I was. I hear he's pretty fresh." No. "He's never done anything to bother me," she lied. "You can't treat them as if they were committed." "Oh, don't get bothered. I just heard that around the town, you know. They want you to play around with them." "Oh, be quiet," she said, surprised at her own rise from resentment. In a moment, Mrs. Hickson came out, and asking the other 2 to wait, signalled her into the office. "I don't like to put young girls in such cases," she began. "I got your call from the hotel." "Oh, it wasn't bad, Mrs. Hickson. You didn't know what he was doing, and he didn't hurt me in any way. I was thinking much more of my reputation with you. It was really nice all day yesterday. He drew me. I didn't want to send you on the case." Mrs. Hickson thumbed through the registration cards. "You take TB cases, don't you?" "Yes, I see you do. Now here's one." The phone rang in a continuous charm. The nurse listened in as Mrs. Hickson's voice said precisely, "I will do what I can. That is simply up to the doctor. That is beyond my jurisdiction." "Oh, hello, Hattie. No, I can't now. Look, have you got any nurse that's good with alcoholics? There's somebody up at the Forest Park Inn who needs somebody. Call back, will you?" She put down the receiver. "Suppose you wait outside. What sort of man is this anyhow? Did he act indecently?" "He held my hand away," she said, "so I couldn't give him an injection." Oh, an invalid He-Man, Mrs. Dixon grumbled. They belong in sanatoria. I've got a case coming along in 2 minutes that you can get a little rest on. It's an old woman. The phone rang again. Oh, hello, Auntie. Well, how about that big Svensson girl? She ought to be able to take care of any alcoholic. How about Josephine Markham? Doesn't she live in your apartment house? Get her on the phone. And after a moment, Joe, would you care to take the take the case of a well-known cartoonist or artist, whatever they call themselves, at Forest Park Inn? No, I don't know, but Dr. Carter is in charge. He'll be around 10 o'clock. There was a long pause from time to time. Miss Dixon spoke. I see. Of course. I understand your point of view. Yes, but this isn't supposed to be dangerous, just a little difficult. I never like to send girls to hotel because I know what riffraff you're liable to run into. No, I'll find somebody, even at this hour. Never mind, and thanks. Daddy, I hope the hat matches the negligee. Mrs. Dixon hung up the receiver and made notations on the pad before her. She was a very efficient woman. She had been a nurse and had gone through the worst of it. Been a proud, idealistic, overworked probationer. Suffered the abuse of smart internees and the insolence of her first patients, who thought that she was something to be taken into a camp immediately for premature commitment to the service of old age. She swung around suddenly from the desk. What kind of cases do you want? I told you I have a nice old woman. The nurse's brown eyes was alight with a mixture of thought. The movie she had just seen about Pasteur, and the book they had all read about Florence Nightingale. They were student nurses, and their pride swinging across the street in the cold weather of Philadelphia General, as proud of their new capes as debutantes in their furs going into balls and hotels. I think I would like to try the case again, she said amid a cacophony of telephone bells. I'd just as soon go back if you can't find anybody else. 1 minute you say you'll never go an alcoholic case again, and the next minute you say you want to go back to one. I think I overestimated how difficult it was. Really, I think I could help him. That's up to you. But if he tried to grab your wrists, but he couldn't, the nurse said. Look at my wrists. I played basketball at Waynesboro High for 2 years. I'm quite able to take care of him. Mrs. Dixon looked at her for a long time. Well, all right, she said. Just remember that nothing they say when they're drunk is at all what they mean when they're sober. I've been all through that arranged with one of the servants that you can call him. I've been all through that. Arranged with one of the servants that you can call on him because you never can tell. Some alcoholics are pleasant and some of them are not, but all of them can be rotten. I'll remember, the nurse said. You're an oddly clear night, and she went back out, the slanting particles of thin sleet making her white over fabric blue sky. The bus was the same that had taken her into town. There seemed to be more windows broken now. The bus driver were irritated and talked about what terrible things he would do if he caught any kids. She knew he was just talking about the annoyance in general, just as she had been thinking about the annoyance of an alcoholic. When she came up to the suite and found him, all helpless and distraught, she would despise him and be sorry for him. Getting off the bus, she went down the long steps to the hotel, feeling a little exalted by the chill in the air. She was going to take care of him because nobody else would, because the best people of her profession had been interested in taking care of the cases that nobody else wanted. She knocked at his study door, knowing just what she was going to say. He answered it himself. He were in dinner clothes, even to a derby hat, but minus his studs and tie. Oh, hello, he said casually. Glad you're back. He woke up a while ago and decided to go out. Did you get a night nurse? I'm the night nurse too, she said. I decided to stay on 24-hour duty. He broke into a genial, indifferent smile. I saw he was gone, but something told me he'd come back. Please, find me studs. That'd be either in a little tortoiseshell box, or... He shook himself a little more into his clothes, and hoisted the cuffs up inside the coat sleeves. Thought you'd quit me, he said casually. I thought I had too. If you look on that table, he said, you'll find a whole strip of cartoons I drew you. Who are you going to see? She asked. He's the president's secretary, he said. I had an awful time trying to get ready. I was about to give up when you come in. Will you order me some sherry? One glass, she agreed wearily. From the bathroom he called presently. Oh, nurse, light of my life. Where's another stud? I'll put it in. In the bathroom she saw the pallor and the fever on his face, and smelled the mixed peppermint and gin on his breath. You'll come up soon? She asked. Dr. Carter's coming at 10. What nonsense. You're coming down with me. Me? She exclaimed. In a sweater and skirt, imagine. Then I won't go. All right then, you're to bed. That's where you belong anyhow. Won't you see these people tomorrow? No, of course not. She went behind him and, reaching over his shoulder, tied his tie. His shirt were already thumbed out of press where he had put the studs, and she suggested, won't you put on another one if you've got to meet some people you like? All right, but I want to do it myself. Why can't you let me help you? She demanded in exasperation. Why can't you let me help you with your clothes? What's a nurse for? What good am I doing? He sat down suddenly on the toilet seat. All right, go on. Now don't grab my wrist, she said, and then, excuse me? Don't worry. Didn't hurt, you'll see in a minute. She put the coat, vest, and stiff shirt off him before she could pull his undershirt over his head, and he dragged at his figure, delaying her. Now watch this, he said. 1, 2, 3. She pulled up the underskirt. Simultaneously, he thrust the crimson grey point of the cigarette like a dagger against his arm. It crushed out against a copper plate on his left rib, about the size of a silver dollar. He said, ouch, as a stray of sparks fluttered down against his stomach. Now the time to be hard-boiled, she thought. She knew there were 3 medals from the war in his jewel box. She risked many things herself, tuberculosis among them, and one time something worse, though she had not known it, and had never quite forgiven the doctor for not telling her. You've had a hard time with that, I guess, she said lightly as she sponged him. Might it ever heal? There, that's a copper plate. Well, it's no excuse for what you're doing to yourself. He bent his great brown eyes on her, shrewd, aloof, confused. He signalled her in 1 second, in his will to die, and for all her training and experience, she knew that she could never do anything constructive with him. He stood up, steadying himself on the wash basin, and fixing his eyes on some place just ahead. Now, if I'm going to stay here, you're not going to get at that liquor, she said. Suddenly she knew he wasn't looking for that. He was looking at the corner where he had thrown the bottle the night before. She stared at his handsome face, weak and defiant, afraid to turn even halfway because she knew that death were in the corner where he was looking. She knew death. She had heard it, smelt its unmistakable odour, but she had never seen it before it entered into anyone, and she knew this man saw it in the corner of his bathroom, and was standing there looking at him while he spat from a feeble cough and rubbed the result into a braid of his trousers. It shone there, crackling for a moment, as evident as the last gesture he ever made. She tried to express it next day to Mrs. Hickson. It's not like anything you can beat, no matter how hard you try. This one could have twisted my wrist until he strained them, and that wouldn't matter so much to me. It's just that you can't really help them, and it's so discouraging. It's all for nothing. That's the end of an alcoholic case. Well. That is depressing. Let's move over to somewhere a bit more comfortable. But yeah. Treatment of addiction has grown better over the years, but well, it's still never a good thing to see someone in the throes of it. And of course still people are mistreated about it. Well, in this case I do also wonder about him. I don't know what that copper plate was that was mentioned, but by the mention of it never healing, I'll sort of get the sense it's some sort of suture for a wound, some covering over something. And from her reaction I sort of infer that he was in pain from it. the drinking was an attempt not to, well, not from any sort of, or had resulted not from any sort of lavish lifestyle or want of partying or excess, but as an attempt to numb some dull pain that he couldn't be rid of. Which is a terrible thing. Unmedicated chronic pain. You can't really complain about it. You can only really feel sympathy for the man. And she did. Yeah, at the end she still lost, she still dropped the case. Not because it was difficult, not because it was hard, but because there was no help in the man. And it's a terrible thing to waste your effort on something futile while you watch someone you care about die. Which I guess is a running theme between these two stories, isn't it, Lord? Well, that was an unfortunate little pairing of stories, I think, we've chosen to do together. Even, like, I mean, Fitzgerald is quite often quite a sad author, like, really. Most of his sad stories are like, you know, people who have lived the high life and sort of fallen back down to earth and are living with, you know, the difficulties of their thing. Whereas these stories were both, you know, people who have, through no fault of their own, come to severe medical conditions and sort of fallen into despair and wrecked from that, which is sort of infinitely more depressing in my mind. Let's have a swallow of water, shall we? What can we say about these texts other than the obvious depressing things? Well, the writing style is very characteristically Fitzgerald. He does a very good job of painting little moments in time. Not just of the characters, but of the sort of accoutrements of it, you know? The way he describes the bottle in the bathroom, the sort of moments leading up to deciding to clean up. It's a very kind of inhabitable mindset. The need to do something but not wanting to do it, of pushing yourself to do it eventually, be overcome with it. And the last scene between Henry and Roxanne in the garden of the house, as they see the ruins of the life they always were planning, lived over all the memories, you know? That sad reminiscence of a life that once was. It's sort of a dreadful thing, really. But he does do it so well. He's very good at painting scenes like that. It's sort of characteristic of him. These lingering moments where you really inhabit the head of the characters. Even though you don't really see too much of them, you know? And even the small details as well in places, like the fact that the windows on the bus were smashed. That's a really good little piece of symbolic imagery, right? The breaking of the glass, mirroring the breaking of the glass bottle, of course, but also just the downfall of things, the decay of things, the bus driver angry about it. The whole thing. A little bit of naturalistic dialogue, of course, with the phone call there. Nothing special, but solid, good. Yeah. I do like Fitzgerald. I think he's a very strong author. He doesn't write the sort of thing I generally enjoy, but his actual writing itself is very, very good. Still, not much to do to say of that sort of thing, eh? Those stories in particular, God, those are depressing. Right then. What else can we say then? Is there anything else? I don't think so. I think that's about the long and short of it, really. Unless I want to go chapter by chapter. I'm sort of prevaricating here because it's about 20 minutes before I plan to end, but I don't have anything else to fill the time, so end we must. Now let's see if anyone's alive to read, shall we? Oh, Scribble's live. She's normally done with her stream by the time I'm up, so take a chance. Appreciate it. Yeah. I hope a lot of you have enjoyed this anyway. But yeah. We'll read on over to Scribble. Gotta get the streak up. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. I never really know what to say as I end these, but yeah, I do appreciate you all being there, as always. And I hope that you have a lovely rest of your day, whatever time it happens to be for you. And as always, I hope that maintains until the next of my streams, which I'll probably be back on tomorrow. I don't know. I'm sort of, I don't know, I'm sort of at an awkward point where I need to go and get some more short things to read, really, because I want to do more 2-hour streams, but I'm running out of stuff that's the sort of right length. Well, either that or I need to start actually doing novels, which are going to take multiple things. I don't know. Maybe I'll start on Oliver Twist soon. That'd be fun. I think it will feel appropriate given my particular accent. But anyway, I'm blathering now. It's starting to rain. Yeah. And yeah, we'll head on over the scribble. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day. But yeah, I'm sure I'll see you all around. You're very welcome, Abbe. I hope you've all enjoyed it. And as I say, I do appreciate you all being there. Anyway, until next time, I wish you all the very best, and as always, ta-ra.